Hi, welcome to our very first episode of Better Every Shift, where we want to grow a community of healthcare professionals who seek a more effective way of leading and developing both themselves and their teams. I'm Naomi and I'm joined by my co-host, Tubi. We hope to support your career development by providing actionable strategies to manage yourself, your interactions with others beyond a one-time encounter. Our ability to talk and think outside of the current conversations, to unpack complex content into simple, relevant actions, and that we're currently doing the work in the clinical space enables us to build credible resources and coaching that's impactful. In today's episode or shift, we're going to talk through who we are, what we do, and how we got to be where we are now. We're going to ask some questions of each other, and I hope you really enjoy getting to know us as we look forward to getting to know you too. Hi, Tubi. I'm really looking forward to asking you some questions today.
Yeah, rapid fire is going to be lots of fun.
Yeah, super looking forward to it. So we're kicking off starting a podcast called Better Every Shift. We thought it would be good for our listeners to get to know us a little bit better. So we're going to ask each other some tricky questions to give people a bit of a sense about where we're going, where we've come from, and what we have to share. So I'm looking forward to some of these because lots of these we haven't asked each other before. So yeah, fab. Firstly, tell me, what was it that first drew you to nursing? Was it a calling, an accident, or did somebody dare you?
It was an accident. I didn't do very well in year 12, and that year the score to get into nursing in Canberra was quite low, and so I got lucky.
Yeah, fab. It sounds a little similar to my story. Tell me about one of the stories from your early nursing career and how that shaped you as a nurse.
It was actually a story my mum told me recently, or reminded me of recently. I was a student and I had a placement on a medical ward, and I came home one day and she said, "Oh, how was it?" And I said, "Well, people come in, they're sick, we fiddle around with their medication, and a couple of days later they get sent home again, and they're still a bit sick, but they're not as sick as they were when they came in, but they're not really better, and lots of them are really lonely." And I completely had forgotten about that because I think that's how I work now.
Yeah.
But I forgot about that experience for most of the 15 years that I worked in emergency and ICU.
Yeah, wow. That's a good story. How would your colleagues describe you on a good shift?
Cheeky,
Yep.
bit of a prankster, always ready for a laugh.
Yeah.
But also willing to help with anything.
Yeah, great.
Energy.
And what about on a not so good shift?
On a not so good shift, probably pretty quiet and pretty introspective, and just not perhaps really aware of what's happening around me.
Great. What do you hope that our listeners are going to take away from this podcast as we start to explore our stories?
I hope our listeners feel seen and heard and feel that some of our experiences are useful to them. I hope that as we start to interview people hear stories that are useful to them, that help them to reflect and just see where they can improve little by little and become more of themselves and nurse in a way that is more aligned with who they are and their values.
Great. Why is it important to you that we share not just what we did in the moment of some of our stories, but what you do differently now that you're a bit wiser and have lived a bit more?
I think that's a really good question. I think reflection is enormously powerful. I'm doing some work at the moment collaborating with people in another area around clinical supervision for nurses. And I always say, had I had clinical supervision, I think it's entirely possible I could still be working clinically. What we would do differently now invites other people and gives permission to go to ask themselves that same question. Knowing what I know now, what would I do differently? I think also when we're in the system, it's really hard to not be taken along by the system. It's really hard to hear your own internal voice and to sometimes be a little bit good rebellious in how you do things or how you approach things, and to think a little bit more laterally about what's really important here.
Yeah. And what does it mean? What does better even mean? Does it mean kinder, sharper, safer, less sweaty? What does it mean to you?
I love the quote from Maya Angelou, which is do the best you can, and when you know better, do better. And I think it's a really nice follow on from the last question you just asked me, because it is that opportunity to have another go and be all of those things: kinder, sharper, safer, more considered, more thoughtful, less rushed, more poor. And I think when it allows us to forgive ourselves, if we think, what would I do differently next time? We don't get stuck in everything that we did wrong. We're thinking forward about what have I learned from this opportunity?
Yeah. Great. How do you check in with yourself after a shift?
I'm not working clinically anymore, and I have to say I rarely did, and that might be why I'm not working clinically anymore. Sometimes after a shift, I would maybe sit in the car for a little while, but things like third space, they weren't a concept when I was working clinically. If it had been a hard shift, I might go with my colleagues and have a cup of tea or have a drink at the pub and a bit of a chat. Now, when I come home, if I've had a hard day and particularly been affected by a coaching client or a story that I've heard, I will get my dogs and walk up into the bush and spend some time in the bush before I come back into my family and all the jobs that have to happen at the end of the day.
Great. And where's the bush for you?
It's probably about 500 meters uphill from my house,
Okay,
and there's a nice little sort of wild area, and there's kangaroos and a view out to the mountains, and it's just really lovely.
Great. Sounds good. What makes you hopeful about the future of nursing?
We know so much more about how to care for nurses better in the work that they do. There are voices seeking a better experience for nurses in lots of different ways. And there are some voices who acknowledge that it's a whole of health system, a reframe that needs to happen, and that nurses are part of that. And I think what I'm really hopeful about is that this is interdisciplinary. So I'm hearing lots of support coming from across all the specialties and all the professions that work in healthcare.
Great. And you mentioned before that you might be known as somebody that was a bit cheeky on shift. How do you bring playfulness and creativity to your work?
That's a hard question to answer because it just kind of happens often. It often happens in response to something that somebody said or did. I really encourage people, even in the serious business of healthcare, to not take themselves too seriously. And I do that by not taking myself too seriously. I like to tell funny stories about my clinical experience because often I'm working with teams of clinicians, and remembering or recalling my clinical experience often allows people to connect with me in a way that is meaningful to them. I try not to take myself too seriously, and I hope that I create a space where others can do the same.
Great. All right, I've got a couple of really quick fire questions for you. What was the most random thing that you've ever found in your uniform after a shift?
Oh, there was always ends of oxygen tubing in my uniform. I don't know why.
No, that's very random.
Might have been a prank. My colleagues might have been cutting a bit off the end of the tubing and just popped it in there on their way past for a joke. Who knows?
And what's one piece of advice that you ignored as a junior nurse that you'd now give to everyone?
Take really good care of yourself in this job because it's a hard job. And if you want to keep doing it, you need to pay attention to yourself now. And
Yeah.
now I do that, and I do tell everybody about that. And I would say mostly from other junior nurses, it probably falls on deaf ears because you don't know it until you know it.
Fabulous. What's your most unnecessary but ritualistic pre-shift routine?
Making food. Because I could always buy it, right? But I would
Yep.
have this whole internal argument in my head about, no, and this will be better. And the few times where I didn't sort of think about it and plan it, like one time I remember just going, I'll just grab this out of the freezer and defrosting it in the tea room, really looking forward to something, a yummy surprise from my freezer, and it turned out to be raw chicken. So the staff room stank, and I had to go buy something anyway.
That is gold.
Mm.
Describe your nursing style using only emojis and explain yourself.
You know the emoji with the love heart eyes?
Yep.
I think that was mostly my nursing style. Or the big cheesy Cheshire cat grinning one. There
Cool.
was that one as well. The love heart eyes. I just really love people. And I think something I learned recently, I'm just going back to the question you asked me before, something I learned recently that I've been learning it over the last 5 years, let's say. I don't think it's anything you finish learning. I am very aware of and sensitive to the emotions of others. And my capacity to connect with emotions in other people is very easy. It doesn't mean I'm weeping all the time, but I find that very easy.
Yep.
For whatever reason, I was very aware of, I couldn't name what other people were feeling, but I could tell they were feeling something, and I was willing to ask the question. And always with the love hearts in my eyes, in the most loving way I could muster. The smiley face one depends on the person you're caring for. And sometimes you had some wild conversations and jokes with people.
Perfect. That's all of my questions for you, Tubi, but I'm really excited about this adventure and sharing it with you and getting to know all of our listeners and hoping that we provide some useful stories for them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Hey, Naomi, it's your turn in the hot seat. I've got a few questions for you. I'm looking forward to hearing some of the answers because, as you already said, we haven't asked each other these questions yet. So I am going to start with the same question. What first drew you to nursing? Was it a calling, an accident, or a dare?
Oh, look, it was really an accident. It might have been a calling, but I missed the calling initially. Was never going to do nursing, failed year 12, repeated year 12 and did year 13, and kind of needed to work out what I was going to do and realised that actually nursing fit the bill. I could travel and do a whole heap of things. So yeah, it was a bit by accident, but very glad I got there.
We're lucky you did too. What's something people assume about you as a nurse that totally misses the mark?
Oh, this is a hard one. Probably one of the things, not so much misses the mark, but I find I'm surprised very occasionally that people I come across that I've worked with for a really long time are really scared of me. My children should be scared of me, but nobody I work with. But I often come across odd people that are really like, but you're the boss and you're the team leader kind of role. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not scary. So that's probably one.
Good one. What's your weirdest or most forgettable moment on shift that is safe to share?
There's a few. Probably one of my weirdest moments was a patient that had delirium. Some time ago, they'd had a cardiac event and had become delirious. And family had warned that they'd had an episode of delirium previously. And this patient had been perfect the shift before, and then the next morning had come in and was writing little secret notes on little pieces of paper and stuffing them in a tissue box. And when I went to talk to her the next morning, she was describing a whole lot of sex acts that she'd witnessed and terms that I'd never heard of before, which clearly hadn't happened. I'm very aware of the people that were on shift, and that wasn't going to happen. So that was probably one of my funniest shifts.
The windows into people's minds.
Absolutely.
What do you hope our listeners take away from the podcast?
I hope that this is a place for a bit of levity. I hope that it's a place for people to kind of sit back and, like we have those nursing conversations where we tell the stories and enjoy the moments and laugh a little bit at how confronting our work can be and how much growth there is and how special many of the moments are in our work and how we can just get a little bit better at managing each of those, because lots of the things that go wrong are because we could have done it a little bit better. I hope that people find it a safe space to explore and just grow a little bit more.
Great. What's a moment you wish you could go back and do over again, and why?
Oh, there's a few. There's probably a couple that will come up in some of our stories. Which are my big ones? There's probably a couple where I wish I'd understood some of the physiology that was happening in some circumstances a bit more at the time. So in particular, I think of a COPD patient that I looked after, and really I didn't get a lot of what was happening at the time. And there's a few of those where I kind of go, I wish I knew more.
It flows nicely into how do you stay open to learning without beating yourself up?
I think I have a very strong growth mindset, and I think beating myself up would mean I couldn't learn anymore. I wouldn't get any better. I'd just be not any better. So for me, learning is an opportunity to get better, and I want to be a little bit better every day.
Me too.
Yeah.
How do we balance honesty with hope, especially when telling the tough stories?
Yeah, this can be really tough. And it's something I've probably got much better at more recently. Up until a few years ago, I would flip between being very direct and being very caring. And I could do either of those quite well, but I didn't manage to do them very well at the same time. And I've got much better at holding space for people and being kind and recognizing that kindness isn't kind unless there's more honesty to it. And I've got lots of examples in my own work that has been really important. So for me, it's holding that space first and then knowing where it is that the person needs to develop before you bring them together.
What is a shift where you walked out thinking I was exactly who I needed to be?
One of them was a shift in ICU where I was in the team leader role, but I hadn't been in it all that long. And we had a patient who had a respiratory arrest with a post nosebleed and had been to theatre and had tamponades put in so that to try and stop the bleeding. He had a respiratory arrest in ICU, and it was a relatively junior staff with a good registrar on, but I managed to get everyone where they needed to be, stop the noise. There were a couple that were trying to escalate and create a lot of drama that didn't need to be. And I managed to get rid of that relatively quickly and get things kind of under control. Yeah. Yeah.
And what would you say to your younger nursing self walking onto their first shift?
I would say, yep, this is going to be tough, but this is also going to be a big adventure, and let's just enjoy the ride. Yep. Keep learning and growing and knowing that you don't know everything yet, but it'll come, and you don't need to know more than you know right now.
I love that. You don't need to know more than you know right now.
You've got what you've got at the time. You've got people around you. You can't get to here until you've done all these other steps along the way.
Yep. So we've got 3 more questions. What song would play during your most chaotic shift montage?
There's probably a few. There's maybe Def Leppard, Let's Get Rocked, probably might be up there. Raw might be in there as well. Yeah, there's probably a few.
If you could gift every nurse one magical superpower on shift, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know that you want them all to have the same superpower. I think the beauty is that we've all got different superpowers and we've actually already got them. But if I was to allocate a specific superpower, it's probably that ability to hold space for other people. I think if you can hold that space for people and just meet people where they're at and not where you've intended that they should be, we would all get a lot further. And maybe we could do that for everybody, everywhere.
Mm,
Mm.
definitely. What's a nickname you've had at work or you secretly want?
There was probably a few that I could have done with. My last name before I was married was Stafford, and so I would often get called Staff, which is not a really cool name when you're working in an acute care service.
No, it's not really desirable, is it?
No. So, yeah, it was said with affection, but it always came with a bit of, it's not quite right.
Excellent. Thank you.
How can our listeners best get involved with our episodes?
They can reflect on stories of their own. They can ask us more questions. I have lots in my head, but I find it difficult to get it all out because I need a trigger. Questions is a really good one. I love voice messages. So if people want to leave us a voice message, that would be a great way to do it. I would love for people to test out if we've had a conversation about, here's some questions you could use with your team. I would love for people to test it out and then give us feedback about how that worked and what they thought went well and what maybe they might do differently.
I'm really excited about our listeners getting involved. So absolutely ask us questions. Send us through information, give us feedback about similar stories because you'll have them, and then engage with some of the ongoing learning resources we've got. But put aside some of the time. Lots of us really struggle with formal reflection or being really considered about what it is that we're trying to grow and develop. So take a little bit of time with each of the things that we work through and step in and let us know what else you need from us.
Mm-hmm.
I look forward to the rest of the adventure.
Yes.
Thanks for joining our very first episode of Better Every Shift. We look forward to spending more time with you and hope that you will check us out on our website, bettereveryshift.com.au, and we look forward to seeing you next time on our next episode. Bye.